All right, you comfortable?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, these chairs were the move.
Just completely forgot about them.
And you had them in the back room.
Yeah, went look for a light, found some chairs.
In a building that you disassemble jet engines in.
Absolutely.
Wow. We are recording. This is the first, like I said before, this is the first episode I'm recording with this new mixer. So everything sounds good in the headset.
Yep, sweet.
Hopefully everything sounds good on the back end and in post. Steve, I'm here in England with you again. We're sitting inside your shop in South Wales.
This has all happened between the last time I saw you and now. Everything that you see in front of you.
That's right. You weren't in this spot when I saw you in 2019.
Had a full-time job.
Yep.
Working all over the place.
Congratulations then.
Yeah.
Working for yourself?
Yeah.
Pulling your hair out?
Out of nowhere. Completely out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Just
crazy.
binned it off.
Wild. So we're in South Wales right now.
Yep.
And this is awesome because when I first started this podcast, the whole plan was to travel the world and have my friends on the podcast. And I started the podcast in January of 2020.
Yeah.
And you know what happened 2 months later in March? Everything stopped.
Everything's gone.
So this is the first trip back overseas with the podcast in the gear. Because the whole first year was basically just myself or Corey and I.
Yep.
I had a few local friends on in 2020. And then last year was kind of the same. I did no international travel last year. Because last year was the beginning of the whole, you got to have paperwork, vaccine cards and stuff
can't
to go
anywhere, can't do anything.
Exactly. So, man. So as we're recording this, it's August of 2022. And finally, 2 years into this podcast, 2.5 years, I'm sitting down with my friends from overseas. So, man, well, first and foremost, let's talk about like what's around us. Because I need to say, anyone who's streaming this on just audio right now, Spotify or
Obviously
iTunes or wherever, you got to go to the YouTube. Now, I can't plug the YouTube yet because I think I'm going to start. I think this is going to be the first episode I start on a new YouTube channel for just the podcast.
Okay.
I think. So the John Ludwig YouTube channel, I think is going to stay automotive related vlogs.
Yeah.
Because basically those are like 15 to 20 minute episodes. And then once a week or once a month at this point, there'll be like a 2.5 hour episode and it throws everything off. So I think I'm going to start a LUDWICK'S podcast YouTube channel.
Just straight podcast.
Just only the podcast episodes. So I think I'm going to plug that. Go to LUDWICK'S podcast on YouTube, maybe.
Well, it's going to be a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So we'll see. But before we do all that, if you're listening, you got to go to the YouTube and watch the video, because if you hear a little bit of an echo, if you're listening on headphones, we're in a 7,500 square foot aircraft disassembly hangar at a World War II aircraft assembly maintenance.
Yeah, it's basically a Royal Air Force station of past days. It's now civilian, but it's got a wild history right back to the 30s.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to get to the YouTube though, to see the visual is what we've set up for a podcast.
It's going to be crucial.
Yeah. So let's talk about what we've got the microphone boom arms mounted to. Because this was literally just laying, and I know what this is, but for everyone listening, this was sitting over there, and we were looking for something to mount the microphone boom arms to.
Yep.
And you're like, what about this? And it worked out, and it's perfect. And you actually had to use your forklift to put it here because it weighs 500 pounds?
Yeah, so it's 500 pounds, 2,700 kilos, best part of.
And what is it?
So this is the internals of, it's basically the core of the engine at this point. So
of a jet turbine engine.
Yeah, so basically what the company does is we do gas turbine disassembly on behalf of salvage operators. So it's like an end-of-life solution. The engine gets to a point of life where it's uneconomical to repair it. And because of what it is and what it does, it commands a certain amount of different metal groups, which are considered precious entities. So in terms of salvage and reclamation, you can get the customers can get relatively good value from their byproduct, obviously at a cost to the company, and from that can either get reused into different types of manufacturing for new material groups. So it affects the companies and the owners' carbon footprint of basically what they purchase. So if they tear down an aircraft, which they would, the engines are removed, they then come into our shop. We spend an amount of time disassembling them. Some of it's nut and bolt operation, some of it is physically cutting stuff off because the tooling that either doesn't exist or you can't get it. But the bottom line is that we need to get it to a point where it's a pure product. So you might find 30 plus metal groups within the turbine unit. This one that we've got next to us is kind of 80% through its module. So it's kind of similar to the way car engines are built. You've got like big component sets. So you get block and cylinders, and then you get head and valves and bits and pieces, and then inlets and exhausts. It's very similar on a gas turbine engine, but it's all set on one common shaft or multiple shafts depending on what the engine is. So when you disassemble the turbine unit, you pull away what we call module packs, and then within their module packs you then disassemble a second time to reduce it down again. So it's all built on the mass production side of things. So when they're doing the manufacturing process, it's designed in a certain way that when you're doing repairs in mid-life or later life when the engine needs the servicing requirement, it's relatively straightforward to pull it to pieces, providing you've got the facilities to make it achievable. The reason we go to this point is because, especially where the booms are, this is a physical mating face for quite an important part of the turbine, and this is essentially the combustion chamber. So this is what would happen in a petrol engine or a combustion engine, but it runs on a lateral field. So everything happens within a shaft, and it basically gives you drive for thrust. So as opposed to giving you physical drive through combustion and cranks and bits and pieces that then goes through a gearbox and final drive units, you then get thrust-driven units, and it's absolutely incredible.
It really is.
If you've never seen it, like most people have flown, most people have seen an airplane, flown an airplane, done whatever. The difference is that when you're sitting on the aircraft, as you guys did when you flew over, you see the engines on the wings. They're great big tubes. They're noisy.
Yep.
You see the plumes of vapor coming out the back of them, and they just do the thing. But inside, quite literally, it's chaos.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason we exist as a company is because the material that is manufactured from has to basically sit comfortably with all the stresses from heat and friction and all the stuff that just makes it go. And it's got to be able to operate at obviously ground level and ground pressure and ground temperature, and as well as going 45,000 feet in the air and operating exactly the same way.
Insane.
It's incredible.
Being mechanical myself, I'm looking at all of like the 10-point headed bolts around the base of this thing. I watched some of your boys hammering away at some of these today, and I can't help but think about like, yeah, this all is put together with nuts and bolts, and like you said, some other specialty tools, but it's all machined and bolted together parts that create fire, that create thrust, and puts us into the sky like we're some Greek myth.
Yeah.
Like insane.
And that's the difference between, glider flying, for instance, and powered flight.
Right.
Propeller-driven aircraft are operated slightly different.
Yeah.
But modern technologies, and certainly military applications, have gas-powered or gas turbine-powered propeller-driven aircraft. So they run through transfer boxes and gearboxes, but it's still the same mentality. You still need to create masses of power just to pull the aircraft through the air, because without it, nothing happens.
Yep.
Some aircraft, some big heavy aircraft are hundreds of tons, and they've got multiple tons of fuel on, and all the people and all the baggages, and even the stuff that you guys brought down as a weight is relative.
Insane.
So if you think every two people have the same amount of gear, minus some of the stuff that you've brought with you, it's quite something.
Then you start talking about military transport stuff, and they're transporting tanks and helicopters, and just wild.
Yeah, and the difference, especially from our individual countries' military powers, the stuff that we've got, the heaviest gear that we've got is American made. But then if you look to the stuff that you guys have got over there that's even heavier again, and it's the same engines, but a bigger aeroplane.
Yeah.
It puts your mind in a slightly different perspective.
The engineering's nuts. It really is.
And it is. The aircraft engineering side of things is absolutely incredible. And I'm sure there's going to be people watching this that are either aircraft technicians or have people known that, either military service personnel or whatever, that do it for a living and just are so blasé about it. It's just a job.
Right.
But the stuff that you have to do and the tolerances that you have to go through, we've got mutual friends that are in the industry as car guys. And, I know how these guys work, and I know, the kind of environments they have to work in. And as much as it being a massive engineering process, the headspace that you have to be in to just operate around that kind of machinery and get it to this point is like a different element of it completely.
Right. Yep.
You know, like we've spoke before about when we're building cars, we know the thing like the back of our hands, and you entrust that element into it that you understand it, and if something makes a noise or breaks or whatever, you kind of know where you're going. You can kind of feel it in the car. Obviously, with an aircraft, if you rebuild a turbine or whatever else, they're tested and checked, and the safety measures are just huge, but it's still somebody doing it.
Right.
And they don't own that airplane. They don't fly that airplane. Not very often. Some of the old guys with like the little Cessnas and stuff, they might do their own maintenance.
Right.
But when you're talking commercial stuff, you've got a group of engineers that do it day in, day out, same routine, and it's just like anybody else's job. But the bigger picture is the thing's got to fly. It's got loads of people on it. It's a massive headspace to get into.
Yeah.
But it's really rewarding.
Yeah, that's nuts. And I mean, in speaking of engineers and planes and jets, what's behind us? Because I wanted to get into that before we dove too deep into turbine engines and all that stuff.
Yeah, the turbine stuff is one of them things. It's always going to be huge. It's always going to be interesting. No matter what advances happens, it's always going to be huge.
Yeah.
And and if anybody's interested, there is so much availability on the web of, you can look at stuff. You can look at engines being torn to bits, and there's going to be countless museums wherever you are that will have an engine that's cranked open that you can see all the bits and pieces inside it. And if you're interested, just throw yourself into it because it will blow your mind. So behind us is it's a little bit of an odd thing. So we've got behind us is an aircraft that was built in 1951, British built, made by a company called Percival, which are long gone. So this is a Sea Prince, and basically this is a navigational trainer for service personnel that would have gone on to fly either large aircraft or reconnaissance aircraft or submarine hunting aircraft or whatever. But basically, what it would have done is it's a relatively basic aircraft. So this hasn't got any wings. The back's off it. It's in a position now where it's going to go somewhere it will go into the public domain. So it'll either become a coffee shop or a glamping pod or whatever. Somebody will pick it up and they'll turn it into a business and they'll just walk with it.
It's for sale, by the way.
And it is for sale. 5,000 quid, you can take it. It's done.
Yeah. We were gonna record inside it. So before we set this up, which you had these leather armchairs just sitting in the back room. We were gonna actually try to set up inside. And after some lighting issues, here we are outside, which I think is just as good.
Yeah.
Would have kept the echo down if we were inside, but it's so cool inside. I mean, if I could somehow carry this on and bring it back to America, this thing would be so cool.
And as much as you don't want it, it's so easy.
Yeah, I'm sure. So easy. You have the connections.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But so it's a 51.
Yeah, so it's built 1951 built. It flew till probably the early 70s.
Yeah.
The British production aircraft was superseded relatively quickly, especially in this era of aviation. It was moving so fast. 50 is early jet. It's pretty close after the wartime.
Right.
But when we talk about British design aircraft, for those that don't know, Lancasters and Vulcans and bits and pieces like that, the gap between the two, I'll let you find out because it will literally blow your mind. To go from a 4-engine piston engine bomber that was in the wartime to a 4-engine jet Delta that's completely unconventional. It's got one wing, no rear stabilizers, a single fin, nuclear capable. It's just incredible.
It's like 15 years probably.
It's less than that.
Less than that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking the war, the bombs, the Enola Gay was a prop engine.
Yep.
And we dropped the bomb from that, one of them, and that was 45. So 15 years later is 1960, which is crazy.
The American-built aircraft are exactly the same. So if you ever look into things, the British Aircraft Corporation stuff has always been a little bit not far-fetched at all, but we were seen as a relatively capable nation when it came to producing good airplanes.
Yep.
One of the things that never seemed to happen in the past is that America never bought any aircraft from the overseas. It wasn't really a thing. There was such a huge amount of engineering technologies available on the home country that it didn't need. So some British-built aircraft flew in the US Air Force. NASA had some stuff, and you're talking, way back into the 50s, really old gear, and now it's swapped. So now we're buying literally everything from America, everything that we kind of fly as a nation in the military is a good majority of it is now American built.
Yeah.
Because it's almost a no-brainer. You know, why would you spend thousands, like millions and millions and millions and millions building this stuff when we've got a really close ally that produces these aircraft second to none?
Right.
And it just makes sense financially. But yeah, certainly when this was produced, this is going back to an era where there was no CAD, there was no anything. This was all draftsman. So every single aircraft, as close as it might be, will have its discrepancies in, you know, there might be odd rivets that are slightly out of line, and no two will be the same, but they all did exactly the same job.
I'm looking at it on the door right behind you. Like the line of rivets, there's like one that's higher than the others right there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right midsection of that door.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hand built.
Yeah, hand built, and all the tinware and all the metal work would have been so some of the perforations on the door would have been pressed. So like you get car bodies that are like huge presses come down, fold the tin out, and then you just, you know, drill through whatever else. But certainly the fuselage section, the skin, I don't know whether you can see it on the video, but inside you'll get like a skeletal structure, which is almost like the chassis of the aircraft, so to speak, but it creates a shape, and it's literally just clad with aluminium sheet.
Yep.
And every single sheet will come in as a, you know, like a size cut piece that they have to then machine or hand cut into that position, and then physically drill every single rivet, countersink every single rivet.
Yep.
And it goes back to like the Rosie the Riveter kind of days. Like there was people just doing this time and time and time again, and it still happens today. So in the UK, we still build wings for like Airbus. That's still done in the country, and we still build parts for you know, military assets and bits and pieces, but we don't actually build, you know, complete homegrown aircraft, so to speak. Not to my knowledge, anyway. There might be small companies that make private light aircraft or bits and pieces, but certainly from a military asset, we don't really do that. Whereas this was literally built right here, and it survived all this time. And that's, you know, that's a credit to the people that built it, because it has survived, albeit it's a bit beaten up. But
yeah, and how many? You said there's only a few left, right?
so yeah, to my knowledge, there's 7 complete units, so complete aircraft. One of them's over the road. We've got a museum close by. And then there's a couple more dotted around the country. And this one was a kind of parts aeroplane, so to speak, like a Christmas tree, as we call it.
Yep.
It was pretty good when I got it. So it was going to get cut up. It was just basically on the other side of the airfield where we are now. A good client of mine owns a strong company over there servicing classic aircraft from, you know, days gone by for overseas companies. And I just had a moment of madness. I spotted it, went into his office, laid it down, and I was like, right, how much? And he gave me a price. I was like, okay. Pulled the trigger, got it, sat down here, had a cup of tea, and I was thinking about it, and it occurred to me. I was like, how am I going to get it here? So, and this is a story just in itself.
Yep.
So an airfield's an airfield. You know, you can't drive anything across the airfield. It just doesn't happen. It's got a live runway. The place, it's like an international, but this big, tiny little thing. So I go down. I organise a date. This building is, you know, thousands of feet long. It's huge.
Yeah.
So down the end of this building, which is, you know, however long it is, there's a crash gate, and a crash gate is basically emergency services come through, they blow the gate open if it ever gets into trouble. So I'm sitting there waiting. I've got my forklift truck. I've moved some stuff around. I've got it set up, and I'm happy, waiting. And I see on the horizon the whole thing, whole fuselage, with the back on it, which is over there. So it's probably 15 meters long at this point, in the air, on a forklift, driving across the airfield.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Just putting across the airfield.
Yeah, and it was full, so the forklift was at full extension. This thing was
Wow.
in the air.
Why'd they have it up so high?
To get it over the fence.
Oh, no. Yeah, because it wouldn't fit through the gate opening.
So because there's no undercarriage, there's a nose wheel, but
Yeah.
it's so awkward to move because there's no wings. Obviously, the undercarriage is on the wing.
Right.
So I'm sitting at the crash gate in my tiny little forklift. This 15-ton monster forklift turns up, gets to the gate, and the gate's like 12 foot high, hops it clean over the gate, just drives
Wow.
it in. And we got it to the back of the building. You can't see it underneath here, but basically I had to build a big wooden crate to sit it on
And wheel it in.
and use the nose wheel, and then connect it to the forklift and just haul it straight in.
Yep.
And then I spent about a day then jacking it up, moving it around, pushing it to the sidewall.
It's so cool.
And then what I did with the inside, I stripped it pretty much bare, And there's a museum in Northern Ireland that have the same aircraft, and all the stuff they were missing, I basically just sent it over and said, it's at the end of the day, the reason we do classic aircraft, static stuff, so museums that don't have live running airplanes, whatever else, it's nothing more than two things. It's a historical asset which has credibility for all kinds of bits and pieces. A lot of families have got ex-service personnel that have been and gone, so to speak. So it's a good little bit of a
nostalgia,
touch of reality and a bit of nostalgia. You get to live and feel what your relative or, whatever, you get to live their life, so to speak. But it's a huge educational thing as well. You know it just as well from the cars that you drive. The technology in the cars that you have compared to the cars that I drive are literally worlds apart.
Well, and the same fact that somebody bought that car brand new when it was like maybe not high tech for the day, but like it was brand new, and somebody saved up and bought that car and drove it off the lot, and so kind of the same with somebody that may have flown, or may have a family member that may have flown this, feels the same way when they get in like that old car that their grandfather had when they were a kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing that I get out of it personally is that there might be, let's say there's a school visit to a museum. If just one kid sees something and goes and has a career that they love and just have the best life, that's it. That's exactly it. There's, the business does its own thing. That's my livelihood. That's the finance. That's everything. Anything to do with museums is as close to the money as I can get it. Because it's not a profiteering thing. It can't be. As much as you can profiteer from education, with stuff like this, there's literally no need for it. The business does what it does, and if this could be done on the side, you can make a marginal amount of profit just to pay for things that you've had to do to get it in the shed and come out clean. It takes one kid to have the time of his life or her life to go away, become an aircraft engineer, and just get that little glimpse. And everybody that's on this that's got anything to do with cars has been there. They've seen that one car, whatever you're driving, it doesn't matter. You've had the experience and looked at it and gone, one of these days, that's where I'm going to be.
Yep.
And it's exactly the same mentality. We do a similar operation within the business where if somebody leaves school, like I did, I left school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And this was literally, I'd never even considered this. Probably the same as you. You probably never looked into your future and gone, I'm going to be sitting here one day doing podcasting, doing this kind of stuff, building cars, doing stuff. You just don't think about it.
Right. This episode is brought to you by Wheel Price, a wheel classifieds app designed by automotive enthusiasts. Wheel Price is the most convenient way to buy, sell, and trade your wheels. They make it real easy to search for the wheels that you're looking for through brand, model, diameter, PCD, and overall specs. You can communicate with sellers right from inside the app, as well as purchase wheels from inside the app. This app is free. Wheel Price is free. There's a link in the video's description and the podcast description for iOS and Android devices. Download it right to your device and get listing your wheels today.
But the bigger picture is that the opportunities, especially in the education system here, for this stuff doesn't exist.
Right.
So to have that real feel before you commit a good part of your life to getting the education you need to be an aircraft technician or an engineer, you've got to be so well into it. It's literally a life-changing decision. So I try my hardest to invite young adults, people that are leaving school, people that are just considering having a trade, and it could be the child of the young person, so to speak, of a friend. They just say, they quite fancy working on an aircraft. Well, come and experience it. Come and put spanners to metal for 5 minutes and just see how you feel. Because if you don't like it, it's a huge commitment. It's like going to college. It's like going to university or college. It has a massive financial deficit. It's going to take a good part of your life to get trained up. And once you're in, you're in.
Yep.
And it's long.
Well, that's kind of how you got here, because you obviously have started. And that's another thing we should have plugged. Not that anybody listening to this might call you for your services one day, but maybe
it might happen.
That you have worked in the disassembly arena of aviation, and now I guess just explain what you do and your overall business, because you kind of stepped away from working for somebody and have started a business disassembling engines specifically, right?
Yeah. So it was a turn of fate, really. I spent I've probably been doing this half my life now. And even before the age of coming out of school, I was spanner in aircraft, because I had the kind of spark that it was, and it was literally a case of, you see an aircraft fly, but why?
Yeah.
How? What happens? And you literally throw yourself into it. So I got an opportunity to work for a salvage company in the Midlands, and we were doing 747s, which is huge.
Yeah.
So, fresh on the job. I had a mechanical background with cars. I used to work in garages and stuff, but that really put a stump on what I did personally with cars, because you were doing it all day and you just didn't want to do it in the evenings, and it just fell off the side of the earth.
That's why I don't do it.
Yeah, it just wasn't interested. I didn't care for it. But with the aircraft stuff, it was a case of the reason I went into it physically from an employment point of view is because I knew that I could develop a skill set that I would use in the future, whether that be going on to a technical job and working for a huge airline, or whether me going into vintage and restoration, and it could have been anything, but this happened. So the company moved into Wales, which is where we are now. It didn't take a turn for the worst. Some stuff in my life changed. Obviously, my daughter turned up. There was a lot of stuff going on. Weird headspace. Just flattened everything. Quit my job. Daughter turned up. And you sit back and go, this is literally the worst thing I've ever done. But I thought to myself, if I'm going to do something, I've got to be credible, but I've got to earn money for me now.
Right.
And it's not just me, it's my family, and I've got responsibilities. So I've got to adhere to that. And I started a company, which is really straightforward in the UK. It's literally, it takes half an hour and you're done. So I just had this company, which is called Perriss Aviation. And it's literally as simple as my surname and what I do.
Yeah,
I couldn't think of anything smart to do.
Right.
And through the previous work that I'd done, it just so happens that paths have crossed over the years, and you get to know people.
And you have contacts.
You start to get a bit of a footprint. And in the industry, I'm really young. And to be a business owner in the industry at this age, unheard of.
Yeah.
Which works in two ways. Some people are really positive, and the other people are like, you for real?
Assume you don't know what you're doing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But it's take it or leave it, literally.
I mean, in the context you basically acquired through disassembling, but you did more scrapping of entire aircraft, right? Because when I first met you, we met through Instagram and cars, obviously.
Yeah.
But when I first met you in person, you were working up it was Leicester, right?
Yeah.
And that was at a pretty impressive looking
Oh, it's unreal.
yard up there. But you guys were disassembling full aircraft, right?
Yeah, so the aircraft would literally fly into the facility.
Yep.
It wasn't an airfield. It was an airfield, but you couldn't land anything there.
Right,
it was just a facility.
Yeah.
So the company at the time would take on a contract, and it could be anyone. We had stuff from Qatar come in, we had stuff from Lufthansa, we had some Royal Air Force contracts, and then we got a big contract with an Eastern airline, and it just happened to be 747s.
Wow.
Which I'd never been on, never touched it. Now at the time, I was 23 when I started. So 9 years ago, I started doing it physically, getting paid for it. And if you've ever flown big aircraft or been around big aircraft, when you're going on holiday, and if anybody's flown 747, they are just enormous. But when you get close enough to touch it, it's just a completely different mindset. But the stuff that you don't see, and this is what really grabbed me, is that because we were doing the salvage side of things, you have to go into literally everything. So all the hydraulics, all the pneumatics, all the fuel systems, and you remove quite literally everything off it, because you've got to get it safe to cut it all up. And almost all of the time we were cutting them by hand. So you'd have a petrol-driven 12-inch disc saw, and you'd just be hacking it to pieces, cutting wings off, and it was great.
Wild.
Fantastic. And the most fun you'll ever have. But you've got to be seriously drilled into it. You've got to be really on it. And two of the big jobs that I enjoyed was removing the undercarriages, because they're just enormous great things. Heavy, nasty, dirty, brilliant.
Yeah.
But on the back of that, one of the first things we did was we dropped all the engines. And on things like 747s and all these big transcontinental airliners, the engines are just huge. which is where this came from. Same engine type. So this isn't from a 747, but it's the same series of engines that were produced.
Yep.
Which is a Rolls-Royce unit.
So this was made right in England.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So when we were disassembling stuff, when we were taking the engines off, it kind of grabbed me. You know, you're talking what holds the engine on physically. If you saw it, you know, I can hold the bolts in my hand, and that's it. You know, there's not a great deal holding the stuff on, but the engineering behind it is relative. And once you get an understanding of why and what and how and what it does and all the movements and the growths and as it flies and whatever else, it just, something snapped inside. So from my point of view then, it was a case of, right, there are global entities that do aircraft salvage year in, year out, and have been doing it for countless years now. But all I ever see is big piles of engines. So there must be a way. There literally must be a way.
Yep.
So I spent the next few years in the previous company developing a system of how to get the engines to a point where they were, you know, salvageable and easily transferred into a recycling position. The nice thing is that we don't have to be essentially precious with what we're doing. Obviously, being an aircraft technician, there's a lot of restrictions and there's a lot of ways that you have to operate. It's just like it's like the industry standard. You work to the book.
Yep.
And there's no two ifs or ways or buts around it. And the hand tool element of it is that you work to a certain rapport and you keep your quality of work at the best of your abilities at all times, with no substitutes, because it's a living thing. But with the engines and stuff, you know, if we get to a point where something's a bit rough, or it's been dropped funny, or something's worn, or a bolt's sheared, or whatever, it doesn't matter. You know, as long as we get it to bits, and we get it to a point where the customer can, or the merchants can accept it as a salvageable material.
Yep.
We're done. You know, it's that simple. So,
Yeah.
As much as we probably do an 85% nut and bolt operation, but the remaining percentage is hacking and chopping and cutting your way into stuff, because
To get to, I mean, because you're ultimately breaking down into pure, like, compositions.
yeah. So
Right.
our you know, sole purpose is the fact that we have to strip to individual metal types.
Yep.
So there will be an amount of metal types within the engine that have to be secluded into their individualities just to be able to go to the right industry.
Yep.
So certain production facilities will ask for certain types of material because they carry different elements inside them.
You were showing me a piece earlier today that was like, it was all gold plate.
Yeah, so some of the blades and some of the attachment points that are inside the combustion chambers have different platings. Now, what the company doesn't have is we don't have the machinery to scan the material, because it's a physical.
I was going to ask
thing.
that. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, at this point, I kind of have to do that with my laser machine to a point, but it's
Yeah.
like super easy compared to this, where it's like, I need to know what type of plastic, if it's got vinyl in it, if it's got PVC in it, like
Yep.
that'll put out a fluorine gas if it's burned or laser cut, which obviously you can die from, or it'll at the very least ruin the optics in the machine. So I've had to like figure out compositions of certain plastics and acrylics, plexiglasses, perspex, whatever you call it, on a very minuscule scale.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was going to actually ask you in just random conversation when you were showing me all the gold plates in one of those pieces. But then when we were moving these super sack bags, you were showing me all the different compositions that are in there. And I was wondering, like, if you just know what those parts are now, I'm sure there's a sense of that.
Yep.
But if you come across an engine that you've never taken apart before, like how you might be able to identify what composition certain pieces are.
And it's relatively straightforward. So the metal merchants that we basically use, so our kind of scrap men, they've got the availability because we're working with such crucial elementary alloys. We have to be almost exactly at 100% with what the material is. So if there's like an aluminium body and it's got a titanium composite center inside it, we need to know what alloy grade it is and what titanium grade it is.
Yeah.
So you must remember from like BMX days when titanium products became available, you got stuff like T6.
Yes.
So T6 is a grade of titanium. Sorry.
Yep.
But then the titanium grades are vast. But when you get to the point of, and this is the bottom line of the business, when you get to the point of selling the material, which is where the customer gains their profitability, is that you've literally got to be right on the money. So what they do is they come down with something called a night-on gun. Mm-hmm. We have to just hit the disc or whatever we're doing with the grinder just to expose the metal behind it.
Yep.
So we get a good clean hit.
Any sort of coating off of it.
Yep. The night-on gun sends a beam in. It's got a radiation deficit to it, so you've got to be a little bit steady. So it's a technical thing. You have to be trained in it and whatever else. So the company comes down. We get to the point where we've got one of each individual type component. And the previous engines that we did, it was 2,600 components.
Wow.
So
2,600 different types of materials?
2,600 individual components.
And components themselves,
So
okay.
That's the reduction that we needed to get to.
Yep.
There are more. There's clasps and rivets and casings and whatever else, but we don't go right into the extremities because there's a certain amount of leverage for mixed materials.
Yeah.
Some stuff just burns away and it's gone. So they come down, they hit the material, they give us what the material is. The big thing that we look for from an industry point of view is we look for the nickel content. So there's a lot of nickel in these engines.
Yep.
And we send that to the salvage operator. The salvage operator then prices it back, and then it's sold. And it's that simple.
That's crazy. I mean, and it still blows my mind the amount of different metals, because you forget how hot these things get.
Yeah.
And the types of metals, because I always think about obviously because it's what I work on, but I always think about the inside of an internal combustion engine where I'm like, man, like there's so much heat in there.
There's loads going on.
Yeah. And the types of like cast iron or aluminum that have to stand up to certain heats and tolerances and all that stuff. Then you think of a jet engine, like it's just so insane that thing is just burning insanely the whole time that aircraft is in the air, over and over and over and over and over again. And the amount of tolerances that all this stuff has to stand up to. I mean, I'm looking at all the bolts. They're just like, it's just wild. Like that. I think about that kind of stuff. I'm not an engineer, but when I'm on a plane, I think about all the things that need to stay working to keep me alive in the air.
And it's literally everything.
Wild.
There's so much when you're flying. As a passenger, you don't need to know what's going on.
Right.
It's meant to be a leisurely experience. It's meant to be comfortable. And that's the whole reason why you're in that bit.
But guys like us are like I mean, you were showing me in this thing, in this 51 Percival behind us.
Yep.
You're showing me the cables and linkages that go back to the flaps.
Everything is cable operated.
Unreal.
Absolutely everything. But the beneficiaries are that the adjustment qualities are, because you've got two individual radial engines, they're going to be tuned individually. You very rarely get two engines that are absolutely identical and tuned identically because, stuff wears over time, whatever else.
Right.
So as the engines deteriorate, you can tune them back in, and you have to be able to have that availability. Modern technology the aircraft industry is I don't work on modern aircraft, and I haven't been involved in, the aircraft that I was working on during the salvage operation. The 747s for the UK have gone. They've been and gone.
Wow.
So I never experienced anything like it. But even then, as a machine, hugely advanced. And like I say, I don't know the modern technologies that some of these guys and girls might be working on, but I can only imagine that off the back of what the motor vehicle side of things have happened, when you look at things like Teslas, and the thing is literally living.
Yep.
It's literally living.
I bagged my buddy Kevin's Performance Model 3 just a few weeks ago. And I'd ridden in a Tesla before. Actually, I'd only ridden in one other Tesla other than his.
Yeah.
And pulling suspension. Now, obviously, most of it's nuts and bolts, but getting underneath that car, as I was telling you earlier, we had like the car, quote unquote, off, but it wasn't really off. It's up on jack stands, suspension's all out of it, no one's in it. I'm underneath it working, and you'd hear things just go and turn on.
Just whizzing
and the
and
car's like
around.
downloading stuff, and it's like always, it's literally living. It was just crazy to be around like that type of tech. So I'm sure it's the same way.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that it's going to, the aviation industry has always been advancing so fast. Technology is just screaming at the minute.
Yeah.
And, I would like to think that one day, I will, let's say I work kind of 35 years in the past. So these engines are like 80s built engines, which is pre me.
Right.
These are older than I am.
Right.
And even to this point, the technology is outstanding.
Well, I mean, this is a whole other rabbit hole. We were talking about the SR-71 yesterday.
Yep.
60s,
Yep.
1960s, 90,000 feet, whatever, maybe even more than that. Like,
Yep. Crazy speed, all tie.
so nuts.
Yeah.
So nuts. And I mean, this is a whole other rabbit hole that I wasn't planning on going down, but I'm a huge, like, Bob Lazar, like, nerd, like, a guy that was an engineer, physicist that worked at Area S4.
Skunk Works guy.
No. And there's no, anyone who listens to like this guy knows what I'm talking about, but, and I won't go through the whole story, but there was a guy that in the 80s came out and basically said, I work at a place called Area S4. It was basically in correlation with Area 51. And he basically said, I have been hired, I'm a physicist, and I've been hired to back engineer components that were apparently taken off of UFOs.
Okay.
And he was working on these like propellant drives, like these drives that were apparently like the propulsion devices of these crafts. And he essentially, long story short, most people listening probably have heard this before, but basically he, in one way or another, kind of uncovered element 115 before a particle accelerator did in like 2012 or whatever, back in the 80s. And he felt like this was a gravity drive, that it could somehow manipulate gravity. Because when you hear about all these UFO sightings, you hear about how they like, they're just off, gone, right? And anything inside wouldn't be able to, it like basically broke the laws of physics. And when you hear about David Fravor, who's a fighter pilot commander, he's the guy who filmed and observed the Tic Tac off of the coast of San Diego, off the coast of the Nimitz. So they were tracking this go from 80,000 feet to 1 foot above water level in they say 1 second, but that's how long it takes for the radar to cycle.
Yeah.
Right. So in one radar cycle, and also should be noted, 80,000 feet is as high as it could read. So they're thinking it was even higher than that. And it was going from above 80,000 feet to 1 foot above the sea level in 1 second.
No,
and so they're basically, to come full circle to like technology and all this, and like wild stuff is the fact that people propose that perhaps this is a man-made thing. Because when you talk to fighter pilots or any sort of like military pilots, they're like, yeah, we see these things all the time. Like it's not common. Like we see these. Even the Nimitz was saying, yeah, we see these things out off the coast of San Diego all the time. And people are like, whoa, what is it? And so it kind of goes back to like what people thought the Foo Fighters were in World War II.
Yep.
So we thought the Foo Fighters were something that the Japanese or perhaps the Germans were working on. But then we heard that the Germans and the Japanese were shooting at these Foo Fighters, thinking that they were us. And then we realized, oh no, like the Foo Fighters aren't, like these are like some sort of
no one knows.
Super future tech. It was like they were observed as a sphere with a cube inside and they could just jet off in any direction. And so we're seeing those things today, apparently. So anyway, it always fascinated me to think that what if it was like some sort of like man-made flight technology? We don't know. But when the SR-71 comes out and it's like so mind-blowing, you think like, what else are they working on?
This is the thing. Like, it's just, there's so much that you don't know. Like you see, there was a thing recently that you guys had like an F-117 stealth, like little triangle fighter bomber thing, and they were pretty commonly known, but they were grounded years and years ago.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they're flying again. Nobody knows why. And it's just one of them things. But
right.
they're out there. They,
right.
You know, it's common knowledge. You can go on the web and just punch them in, and they're flying. They're doing their thing.
I can't imagine what those looked like when they first hit the sky. You know what I mean? Like hold on, this thing's all messed up. That is definitely feeding back. That's probably what that feedback's been this whole time. It's crazy. I mean, when the stealth bombers first started flying over the desert, okay, people were probably like, those are UFOs.
But you know, a notable thing is that we, as far as I'm aware, the UK's never had that technology. You know, you guys have been there. You guys have done it. It's been done for years.
Yep.
We have our own version of, or we had our own version of Area 51. You know, we had an establishment that was, it was called a test facility, but they were building all kinds of wild, random, oddball stuff.
Yep.
Most of it crashed.
Yeah.
as it would.
I can't imagine the stuff that we crashed on the desert, you know?
Yeah, but even then, I mean, this is going back to the era when this thing was built. You know, the technology that they would this. So to give you an idea, when this was being produced, they were working on the Blackbird, the SR-71. And look at the difference. Like, this is a piston engine.
Cable driven. You're operating flaps with cables and rods.
And you've got like a 3,000 mile an hour, high as the sky, just ridiculous,
insane
reconnaissance airplane.
Unbelievable.
It's just designed to just have a look around.
And you know, you wonder if that stuff gets trickled out. You know, wartime obviously spurs technology advances.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously that's a necessity. But yeah, after World War II, all this crazy stuff started coming out. And what were we experimenting on during World War II? Which is pretty wild.
Yeah,
so
and if you look at the German stuff of World War II,
we were talking about that today.
yeah, and they were doing it.
Yeah,
you know, they were making
V2 rocket was
stuff.
like the most insane thing anyone had ever seen.
And let me tell you, I moved one of them things in London.
A V2?
An actual V2.
Wow.
So along some of the other German stuff that I moved for the Royal Air Force Museum, part of the job was to basically they rang the company I work for up and said, right, can you send some guys down? We've got something to move.
They didn't say what.
We're an aircraft company, so we were like, it's going to be a plane. Great. So we travel from Leicester to London. We cruise down, get into the facility, have a meeting. What are we moving? Yeah, so we're moving something German. And all the stuff we'd done was either Second World War bombers, fighters, but it was all aircraft.
Yeah.
Which is what we did. Yeah, it was straightforward. So we walk into the hangar, and there's this huge airplane in front of us. And we were like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Didn't have any wheels. It was a flying boat, so it was a seafaring thing. We looked at it and went, yeah, right, we're going to need some pretty heavy lifting gear, but nuts and bolts are nuts and bolts.
Right.
We'll get it. They said, no. Come around the corner. And we were presented with a V2 missile laying on its side.
Wow.
And it was something like 14 tons.
Jeez.
So, but just incredible. The thing was just immense. If you haven't been close to one of these things.
Never, yeah.
And I don't know if you've got any. You must have some somewhere.
I don't know.
In the States.
I mean, there could be some aviation museum somewhere that's got a V2 in it that I'm just not aware of.
Yeah, there probably is. Because, I mean, like we spoke about the other day, you know, when the stuff that I worked on was originally taken by an American colonel and is, you know, Band of Brothers effectively. They just went in and just took the lot.
Yeah, exactly.
But for exactly the right purposes. You know, the Germans were so far ahead of everybody else. We needed to find out. You know, we needed to find out what was going on.
I mean, and then the darker side of that story is Werner von Braun and NASA and, you know, like these literal Nazi murderers that were basically the start of our NASA program. Yep. But we already had Russia in our sights at the end of World War II, knowing that they were going to be the next foe. And Russia was liberating a lot of these German places, or not necessarily liberating, but imprisoning these guys. And so they were trying to scoop up all the tech guys too. So we kind of like, it's just crazy it's
mad how it just falls down into certain categories. But yeah, these things are just incredible. I couldn't tell you where the German artifacts are aircraft wise where you are, but they're there. And they're there in dozens. Like, they took literally one of everything they could get their hands on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's all completely genuine. You know, there's aircraft that have got an engine at the front and an engine at the back. One pulls, one pushes, and it was a bullet. You know, these things were being built. Yeah. You know, like the jet aircraft, the very early jet aircraft. You look at that Messerschmitt with the two gas turbines on the wings.
Yep.
So I had the experience, and this kind of ties into a little bit of car stuff. So I had the experience to look around one at the museum that I was working for.
One of those Messerschmitts?
Yes, I think it was a 262, something like that. Mm-hmm. Basically, it was their first jet aircraft, first conventional jet airplane.
Yep.
So the guy said to me, he was like, right, just have a look around it, get inside it, and it's the most disgusting thing to see. And the floor is literally flat. So your rudder pedals are right in front of you. You bolt upright. There's like 3 dials, 1 stick. The thing's horrible.
Wow.
It's like sitting in an old tractor just with the cockpit on.
Yep.
So he said, you obviously know what you're doing, aircraft-wise. I said, yeah, all right, I can kind of get my head around stuff. He said, right, tell me how you start it. And I went, right, yeah, no problem. So I've got in the cockpit, climbed into the thing, clambered up it, looked inside it, nothing.
Really?
Battery master switch. That was it, just a battery master switch.
Yep.
And it was all in German, so I couldn't read it anyway.
Right.
So I kind of got my head around it, battery master switch. I looked at the cockpit. This museum curator was just on the side of the aircraft, and I went, no idea. So he said, oh, come out here. So I got out of the aircraft, climbed down, clambered by the wing, and inside the engine, generically on the front of engines, you get like a bullet. So it's like a conical shape. And normally on big gas turbines, there's like a little rubber cone at the end of it, and it stops ice building up on the front of the engine, basically.
Yeah.
So this one had a hole in the end of it. I was like, okay, so it could be like something like a Venturi. It could be anything like that, but I don't know. This is really early
It's
tech.
like late 40s. Oh, no, early 40s tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he said literally, reach your finger in and see what you can find.
No way.
And
It's like a bat switch in
I was
there?
like, this guy's having me on. This guy's doing me here. He's gonna pull me to pieces over this. So I was like, yeah, all right, I'll play along. Reached in, and there was a ring pull, just like a key ring pull.
Yeah.
So I pulled it out, and it was attached to a cable. So I was like, what the hell is this? He said, oh, there's a one-cylinder engine in there. So you pull it, it turns the engine over, you ignite it, and you're on.
Wow.
So it was literally a pull start gas turbine.
Wow. That took off and flew in the sky.
Yep. And if you needed to start it, it was literally a case of a guy goes in the front, pulls the ripcord, the engine turns over, you ignite it, it does its thing. The little one-cylinder built by Volkswagen, I believe. Because
Wow.
the engine was something called a Jumo,
Yeah.
which was the manufacturer. And
Wow.
apparently, this curator was going, yeah, it's a one-cylinder Volkswagen built, just air-cooled engine, just a
Yep.
little tiny one-cylinder thing.
Just to
around.
get the thing turning, right?
It just literally spins the boat around.
Yep.
Same as what you do with a big engine.
Yep.
You induce air into it, you ignite it, you put fuel through it, and it just takes over. It idles and does its thing, and then you just keep throwing fuel into it. And providing you're throwing fuel in, you're generally pretty good.
Right, right.
It's obviously more complicated than that.
Yes,
generally.
but yeah, in layman terms, that's basically what's
Yeah.
happening.
So, but obviously to start a gas turbine engine, you've got to physically get it to turn.
Right.
So you have to have something that's able to create that motion. And they did it.
Wow.
So instead of plugging it in and doing all this stuff, you literally just battery master, battery on, whack, fuel, ignition, done, gone, and you're off.
Yeah.
And it was that simple.
That's crazy.
And it literally threw me on my head.
Yep.
Because you wouldn't even consider it. You'd walk past it in a museum and go, huh, jet engines. Good.
Yeah. Early jet engine.
And then literally opposing the thing was a Spitfire.
Yep.
And it just looks archaic.
I bet.
As good as they are,
Yep.
archaic. And,
Wild.
and this is literally the same era. And you've got a passion for German cars. I've got a passion for German cars. And I've noticed, especially when you get down to the real core production of these cars, the German stuff it's just got a different mentality. Mm-hmm. You've experienced a lot of cars, especially American homegrown cars and different bits, and the Japanese cars, and
Right.
all these different, relatively well-considered vehicles, high-end cars, so to speak. Even the basic German stuff, like the 190s, which we've both had,
Right.
they're just different. They're
Yeah.
solid,
Yep.
so solid,
And in many ways, like over-engineered, German over-engineering.
hugely.
Yeah. I mean, my 1960 Fintail, just everything underneath it was like, do they have to do half of this stuff?
Yeah.
But it works. It's just,
I've-
you
I've-
can just tell the mentality that some of these designers were like, oh, we could do it this way and that way.
Yeah, completely. Like I've recently unstitched the front end of one of my 202 chassis. And even to that point, and this is mass production cars, when the Fintail was built, it was a different world.
Hand-built stuff.
It was hand produced. And,
Right.
you get back to the era of like this stuff, it's literally, everyone's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
The world's in different spots, whatever else. And even on this mass produced monocoque chassis car, it is so hard on the front. Whereas the 190 was a little bit softer.
Right.
So on my 190, I had a static one, and I blew both the inner arches off because it was just too low. I bottomed out the shocks, blew the arches off the chassis, and just,
Yep.
it was my mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Young kid, stupid idea, just bottomed out.
Yep.
But doing the de-stitch on that side, because I tend to do the car stuff as I would do aircraft stuff. So there's a certain mentality of doing stuff, and there's a certain way to do things. And if it's got a spot weld on it, and there's a tool to undo that spot weld, then that's the way to do it.
Right.
And then you pull away, and you leave whatever's left is good. You can work with it, and
Right.
I can do the suspension and do all that stuff afterwards. But it's just a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I would like to think I've had enough cars to experience a slightly different way of doing things.
Yeah. It's got to have you looking at cars in a totally different outlook because, like, I look at half of the stuff strewn across the shop, and then think like, man, working on the nuts and bolts on a car has got to be so much easier. I mean, obviously newer cars have like a lot of tech and wiring and electronics and stuff, but as far as like the nuts and bolts aspect, it's pretty simple with like a normal toolbox for the most part, compared to a lot of the stuff that you're messing with here.
I think the thing that I experience, especially with UK cars, is they can be a bit misleading. So you can have a car that looks pretty good, but underneath, if it's been in a certain area, you'll have a lot of corrosion, and that's where you start to fight the mechanicals of it.
Right.
With this stuff, it does the same thing because it's heating, contracting. You know, it's swelling all the time, and it's got to be in a certain environment. Stuff is tight, but the corrosion element of it is it's non-existent.
Yeah, rigorous maintenance and
and the materials are the same. So, you know, I couldn't tell you competently now what this material is made out of, but a similar material would be something like a wasp alloy, which has a very small amount of corrosive technologies in it. You know, it's designed to do a job in a really, you know, ferocious environment.
Right. Right.
But some of the translating attachment points and some of the fasteners and fixings, bolts and bits and pieces are made out of common material because they're in the same environment.
Yep.
Which gives you the element of, it's going to be tight, but it will come.
Wild.
You know, we go through tools all the time because we're at the back end of it. So as much as this engine is an incredible piece of engineering, it's been sitting doing nothing for 10 years.
Yep.
So stuff's going to fuse, and, you know, like old seals. I mean, you can still see on this one now where the oil print is still sitting there where it was fused together.
Pretty wild. Yeah.
So and of course, oil over time gets stagnant and gets gummy, and but again, you get down to the tolerances, and everything's got seals in it, and it's designed to do a certain job. So when you're pulling the thing to pieces, if you're in a shop environment where you've got accessibility to everything that you need, it's still a difficult job, but you've got assistance of, you know, the tooling. It's designed to make your life easier.
Well, you said that one engine you took apart, basically you laid all the parts out of that engine and went from one end of the shop to the other, basically.
Yeah, it literally did. So this is 170 feet.
End
to end.
Yeah.
And it literally filled it. So
crazy. Yeah, when you nut and bolt take it all apart, or things that are pressed and you're not hacking it up with a torch or anything like that, you're actually taking it apart.
Yeah.
Pretty wild to see all the components that go into a jet engine that put people in the sky.
Yeah, and you've come at a good time because you've seen the kind of byproduct of what we do. You know, the what you're seeing now and what this is kind of the immediate last stage. So once this is done, the engine's finished.
Yep.
So this is probably 8 to 10 hours from completion.
From total teardown.
From total. So the rest of the engine is, you know, over there, stacked up.
Yep. Ready to go.
But obviously what we have to do is we have to vigorously go through every single component and weigh everything and then scan everything. But we've also got to nominate where the thing came from. So we have an availability of a suite of manuals so that we understand, because it's all good and well me, you know, I can do this all day long, you know, talk aircraft engine, whatever else. But the guys that I employ that don't have a background, it's got to be relatable. So that it's got to become to a point of understanding where that if I say a certain paraphrase or whatever that's aviation specific, two or three people won't understand what I'm saying, but the people that are in the industry will be like, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes difficult purely because of the translation between how the manual reads and what the guys see in front of them.
Yeah.
Because what it will be called is, you know, some stuff is relatively straightforward. So the whole assembly is the combustion case, but like the small piece over there, which is like a basket, is the annular combustion liner.
Yep.
So if I said to you, can you go and get me the annular combustion liner? You'd be like,
no,
I just can't.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
Yep.
That's the most difficult thing, but it goes back to the thing of giving people opportunities.
Yeah.
You know, in this industry, in this part of the industry, you don't need to have a background in doing it. What you do need to be aware of is the safety risks that you're working with. So one of the biggest elements that we have to deal with is the weight of things.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, 270 kilos.
Yep.
Serious weight.
Well, I mean, I remember when you first started doing this whole thing and you were tooling up your whole business. I remember when you posted that you bought that brand new Toyota forklift. You know, it's like, I mean, that's probably your most important piece of machinery in here.
Yeah, and but again, it's the safety regime for operating that inside a facility in a private business in the UK. That's got its own folder of just,
I'm sure.
this is how to deal with this situation.
Yep.
But every single thing that we do, so even when I lifted this into this position, there's like an assessment form for exactly that job. So, because I'm here and I can do it, I'm under my own control here. I haven't got left anybody else to kind of get in the way, so to speak. But when we're working in a team of 4 people and there's people dotted all over the place and there's stuff everywhere, the health and safety side of things is crazy.
Yeah.
But it's literally the most important thing.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah. Like if an engine gets damaged or a component gets damaged, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's going
to go to salvage.
Yeah,
it's done its thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Obviously, if an employee or a personnel has and it could be something simple as like a trapped finger or something like that, it can make the biggest difference, not to me, but to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't afford to be in that position.
Yep.
So, but it's the best thing you'll ever do.
Well, I mean, and it's, I mean, as I said at the beginning, it's such an awesome spot. I mean, and we talked a little bit about the facility that you're in, and we could talk a little bit about that, but it's a 7,500 square foot unit. I mean, you're getting a great deal on the spot, and you're in an old, I mean, it was built in 36. Is that what you said? This whole facility. I mean, so it was an airfield, and there's numerous humongous hangar buildings here.
Yeah. So this was at one point in the history of the Royal Air Force, so to speak. This was a maintenance facility for the whole Air Force. So each country operates an amount of airplanes.
Yep.
So, and obviously in days gone by, we had loads of stuff going on. So the squadrons or the individuals that were operating the squadrons or the stations would send aircraft through to here specifically. So they'd pull them out of their day-to-day routine, the flying routine. They'd send them straight into here, and they'd go through a rigorous maintenance program, which could be anything down from, it could be something as simple as a check. So there's different elements of check, or it could be a complete rewire.
That was it. Did the impending threat of war build this place? Do you know? Because if it was built in 36, I mean, Hitler was already. I think wasn't it 36 when he invaded Poland?
I think so, yeah.
Or whatever the first chess move was of that whole deal.
Yeah, it's pretty early.
Yeah.
So this is one of 3 kind of hot airfield spots. So our Cardiff International Airport used to be, a joiner. So basically, we had there's a place down the road called Landau. Landau has a racetrack these days, and all the old buildings are still there, but it's all private business, and it's gone. The old runways are still there, but they're used for training and whatever.
Right.
St Athens stayed as a Royal Air Force station just because of its location. It's right the way away from everybody. And then Roos, or Cardiff Airport as it's known today, was kind of a bit of a mix between the two. But at the end of the war, the 3 airfields were joined, and you could basically land an aircraft into this facility and take it to the next airfield just simply by taxiing it down. And you're talking maybe 3.5, 4 miles away.
Yep.
So they're taxiing around, and then originally a lot of the decommissioning got done at Landau. So there's
after the war, like post World War II.
Post-war. During the war, I'm not sure of the footprint that St Athan had as an airfield. Whether it was just maintenance, whether it was some squadron-based stuff.
Right.
With it being coastal, it would make sense for a squadron to be here to do, operational sorties to just check stuff out. And
Cardiff was hit hard in the Blitz.
Yeah.
Like Germany hit Cardiff real hard. I mean, I remember hearing like a lot about how unbelievable it was that Cardiff Castle stayed where it was during World War II, and they had a lot of like underground communications put in there and whatnot. And yeah, so I mean, it was a vital area in World War II, especially at the end of World War II when Germany had reached, had taken France and was hitting over the channel real hard.
So the wartime stuff, it's a bit. I don't know enough information about the wartime period as to say that this is exactly what happened.
Right.
Certainly post-war.
It was here. I mean,
it was definitely here.
36.
What it did. There are pictures of like aerial photography shots of the Landau site, and you can see the typical like triangulated crossed runways, and then everywhere but the runways there are just aircraft scattered everywhere.
Wow.
And they're all packed in super tight.
Yep.
They're all over the place. So in later times it happened here. So where we drove this afternoon with the museum stuff. So that used to be a salvage kind of organisation there, and they used to tear down countless aircraft. So you're talking way back from the kind of late 60s to the company that I used to work for did some aircraft on site in 2010, 2012.
Yeah.
So it was really long. But certainly from this place, it was always known for its maintenance, and it was one of the biggest facilities. So where we're sitting now, in this facility, in this exact building, was construction and production of aircraft components.
Yep, that's what you're saying.
So
yeah.
this whole facility, door to door, would have been producing brand new components for the aircraft that were being repaired.
Pretty cool.
Because the aircraft were built, one of the kind of mainstays of the station was the Tornado, which was like a joint venture between ourselves and some European entities. But because they were built in the 70s and the 80s, when you get to like the early 2000s, and don't forget, these things have been through the first Gulf War, they've been through the Optelic and the second Gulf and whatever else, but they've been consistently used day in, day out for like 30 years. So the company that built the aircraft was kind of created, and then it did the thing, and then it fell back to where it existed. So to construct the components that are needed to repair the jets was literally done on site. So brand new components were built out of raw material, machined to the production lot. But then it goes back to the same thing. As much as it's a mass-produced airplane, it's still different. So you have to tailor it to each individual airframe. And they were literally built right here. And this was a CNC place.
It's kind of crazy in that sense that in full circle, they were building parts to create aircraft or keep them in the sky, and now you're in here literally tearing them all apart.
Yeah,
the engines apart, and it's kind of like a.
And that's the interesting thing with the site. The site now, the section that I'm in, or that we're in rather, is the salvage side of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's like full 747s outside here getting dismantled.
And the company that are outside are massive. They've just gone into the States.
Wow.
They're in
the E-Cube.
Yep. So they're in Europe, and they basically do what I did in my previous career with the previous company on a much bigger scale.
Yeah. Wow.
But then we've got other companies.
Yeah, you said the other company, the singer of Iron Maiden owns.
Yep. So Bruce Dickinson has an involvement with a company called Caradev, which used to be Cardiff Aviation, and every now and again he pops in.
It's so funny.
Yeah, we've seen him on push bikes and stuff, and I've been for a curry with him. And it's just
so crazy.
Just random stuff. He just turns up and we're
in such a small town, like outside of Boverton, South Wales, like super small little town. And there's the singer of Iron Maiden on a push bike.
And in the museum there was a small room within the facility that had a big mural of one of the Iron Maiden albums. I think it was Aces High. Yeah. Where it's like is it Eddie? The guy that Iron Maiden have as their mascot.
Oh, okay.
So he's inside a Spitfire flying around. Yeah. Some of the guys used to work there painted this huge mural on the front of this building.
That's hilarious.
But they kept it. The museum kept it, and like I say, there's a company over the road that do classic aircraft, classic jets. So that kind of relives the old part of St Athan.
Cool.
And then in recent years, so I can't quite put a number on it, but there's an Aston Martin manufacturing facility here as well, and they produce the SUV.
Yep. Wow.
Which is incredible. The whole place is literally a boiling pot of industry right now, and it's only going to grow. So to be here this early and to watch it all kind of happen,
right?
We're at the bottom end of the industry.
Yeah, but you're at the ground zero too for where it's going, and
absolutely. And for where we are, we almost see every part of the industry right on the doorstep. The live stuff and all the big stuff that happens at Cardiff Airport, where British Airways do their heavy maintenance. You see it all the time. You see the aircraft coming in and out. Yeah. And then literally 4 miles down the road that they have to fly over, the pilots that are operating some of the aircraft out of BA now would have flown the aircraft that they're seeing getting scrapped right underneath them.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's, the distance is nothing at all.
Yeah.
But, these are aircraft that aren't even built in the UK. These are Boeing aircraft.
Right. Right.
And they're still getting broken down here.
Crazy. Actually, speaking of Boeing, the guy who bought my Century works at Boeing in Victorville, California. I think that's building engines. I can't remember what he said he did. Yeah. But there's a Boeing facility in Victorville out in the desert south of Barstow in California. And that's where the Century went. My Century went to, I think he's young. I think he's like 29 or 30.
Unreal.
And so he lives on site. He's from Washington, which is crazy because that's where I bought the car. I bought the car just outside of Seattle. And so I meant to mention that earlier. I think it's the first I've told that to you, but yeah, he's a Boeing like mechanic or builder or
and that's
whatever.
it. So, you know, that guy and me are literally at the opposite end of the
Yeah,
spectrum.
exactly.
He's producing from raw,
Yep.
and I'm taking back to raw material.
Pretty crazy. Well, and to shift gears a little bit, speaking of the Century and high-end luxury cars, I'm a little saddened that when I flew here, basically for Roll Hard, which we're doing in a few days, the Roll Hard show at Bister Heritage, little bummed out that the S600 wasn't quite ready to go.
Yeah, so I got thrown a real nasty hook on the S-Class with a recent purchase. So for anyone that doesn't know me, I do C-Class cars.
Yeah,
so,
W202s mostly.
Yeah, W202 is my kind of mainstay.
Yeah.
I don't know, they've just bitten me hard, and I just like them. They're a good, fun little car.
And now 2 guys that work for you have 202s.
Yeah, so you know the local guys that I hang around with in the area, that most of us are Mercedes heads. You know, we've got a common interest, but I don't know what's happened, but recently everybody's bought one.
Yeah,
and we've gone from, you know, I've always had a couple. My good friend Nick has had, well, just countless, mate. He's just you know, rotated Mercs all the time, but he's now got a couple of, and then everybody else that we know is just like, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of feeling that.
Yep.
And they're just like happening. So
well, then the W220 lands.
So the 220 was I'm still not sure on it. I adore it, but it's one of them things.
So it's a W220 S600 with the twin turbo V12 in it.
Yeah, so it's the facelift 220 V12 5.5 with the M275 motor, which is something I know nothing about.
Yeah.
I generally don't like the 220 chassis because they just end up getting abused, nasty. People just, the cost of repairing things is so extortionate that they just throw them in the bin.
The second and third owners of those cars are the reason why they're so unmaintained and destroyed. Like, because they were the ones who financed it secondhand and didn't have the money to maintain it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that car is an 88,000 mile black on black limousine.
Yep.
And it's got everything in it bar the telly between the rear seats. Now, I saw a video when I was about 14, 15, and you've probably seen it.
Another video you're talking about.
Yeah, the S600 laid out, peeling around Japan.
In a tunnel.
It sounds incredible, sits heavy.
Formula car. Sounds like a Formula car.
But probably similar to the way you saw the Century, is you see that car and you go, I'm never going to get the opportunity. Purely because of what it is.
Right.
You know, if you talk like 190 Cosworth and stuff like that, and you know C43 AMG 202s, they will come into your financial catch net at some point. Everybody's going to get there at some point. Whether you choose to blow 25 grand on a Cosy or whatever it's going to be,
right.
It's down to your personal choice.
Yeah.
So I drink down at a local pub. It's just one of the things that we do. So I'm down the pub one day and I spot this car about 6 months previous. I was going to my local parts store where I get cutting discs for doing exactly what I do.
Yep.
And I see this nasty old tired black S-Class sitting in the corner of a lot. Push comes to shove, I know the guy that owns it. And I didn't realise he owned it. So he said to me, I'm never going to sell it, but it's been sitting there for 5 years. Coil pack's broken. And for anybody that knows the 22600, yeah, it is exactly what you're thinking.
Like almost $2,000 for a coil pack.
So one of these days, he just gives me a call. He says, I'm shutting down the company. I've got to shift the car. Okay. So I said, right, I just started the business.
Yeah.
My
So
money is like...
You're in the middle of investing.
Yeah, I'm on little copper coins at the minute, just rubbing them together.
Yeah, yeah.
So he says, this is what I need for it. And I went, I can't afford it. So he said, where do you need to be realistically on this? And I just flew it straight off the hip. I was like, look, I can do about 500 quid. And he went, call it 495, you can take it tomorrow.
Unreal.
So at this point, I didn't know what I'd done. All I knew is that I just paid for a 2004 twin, and I didn't know it was a twin turbo at this point.
Oh, okay.
All I'd done is I'd bought a 2004 black on black S-Class long wheelbase.
Yeah.
With
For which is a good deal.
Fantastic.
Which
but it
is
had
awesome.
broken everything.
Right.
Literally
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I was like, right. So again, I spoke to Nick. I rang him up. And he's hot on his Mercs.
Yeah.
So he was like, and I was on the phone. He was like, right, pop the bonnet. I said, yeah, no problem. And I knew the coil pack had gone at this point.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, I'm going to be into this for a fairly good bit of money. So he said, right, is the coil pack off? I said, yeah, coil pack's off, turbo cooler's off, inlet pipes are off, etc., etc. He went, just look down the side of the engine. And there it was, a little turbo.
Yep.
So he was like, have you bought it? I went, yeah, I bought it. He was like, yeah, good. That's a really good car.
Wow.
So looking into it, there are other versions of it in the next chassis up. So the 221.
Yes. Yeah.
And another friend that I know on through Instagram, a guy called James, has got a silver one that he's had recent engine problems with. So,
Yep.
of course, I got in contact with him and was like, I don't really know what I've done here. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I went through about 2-3 months of trying to get my head around whether the coil pack was something that could be repaired. And if anybody's ever looked into these things, they're just ludicrous. Now, there is a company in the States that does it. $600, you send it away, they rebuild it,
Really?
it's done.
Yep.
But the price of sending it there, getting it repaired, and getting it back, sorting all that out, I was like, yeah, that's close to $1,000. And how long is it? And there's no guarantee.
And it's rebuilt. Yeah.
There's no guarantee.
Yeah.
And as you've probably learned over the years with any car, a genuine part is always better.
Yep.
So it soon became apparent that Mercedes produced this part through an exterior company, but you can only get them through Mercedes unless you get a refurb unit or a recon unit or somebody that's got a new old stock part.
Right.
So I started to flick through. Generically, new old stock was like, or refurb was like £800, which is still strong. You know, you're getting to twice the price of the car now.
Yeah. For what you paid for the car. Yeah.
So thankfully, I've got a good connection at Mercedes, and the company has the availability to get a discounted part, a discounted cost to a point, because we're not a motor factors. And I rang them up and I was like, right, I just want to know the price, and if it's good and it's hot, I'm going to pull the trigger on it.
Yep.
So after it had all gone through, £1,137 later, I ordered this part from Mercedes, which had to come from Germany. So now I'm itching. I'm like, because this is the only thing that's stopping it going.
Right.
Because obviously I didn't even try and start it.
Right.
Because everything's the right side of the engine is just open.
Yeah.
So I literally trailed it back here and pushed it in the shed, all 2 and a bit ton of it with flat tires, rolled it in the shed.
It's a big car.
Just left it alone.
Yep.
So I've got to the point now where I've got the stuff. I've gone into Mercedes. They've beaten me up. I've walked out with a nice box of a coil pack in it.
Yep.
Went through the car meticulously, took all the plugs out, did all the stuff, put the coil pack back in, checked everything. And of course, because I've never started the car, I checked it again. And you're always questioning yourself.
Right.
So a brand new battery, fired it all up, put the key in, dashboard lights up, wheel moves, everything's moving, whirring, laughing. And because of the moment that I was in at the time, I didn't really pay attention to what was going on. All I was concentrating on was like, what can I see in front of me, and just absorbing that all in. What I didn't hear was the fuel pump. So I was like, okay, no problem. So I thought, regardless, if it cranks, there's potential.
Yep.
So I cranked it over, and it all came to life. It all fired up. So we threw some starting fluid through it, and I was a bit cautious of doing it, but I just did a very small amount just to see on that one side bank if the ignition system was live enough to fire the cylinders and actually give some compression, which it did.
Yep.
So I ordered a fuel pump 6 weeks ago.
Oh, and it still hasn't showed up. Oh
No.
man, that's like the common thing right now. You order a part and you're waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for it.
And purely, again, because of what it is, if I was driving a 500, I could go to a motor factors.
Yeah, exactly. Those V8s had parts everywhere.
But because it's a 600, it's a particular pump.
Yeah, of course.
And again, I haven't looked into it too much because of what I'm doing in the business. I haven't got time to just run around with a car that I haven't got to. Like my 202 needs, as good as it is, aesthetically it needs buckets. You know, it needs paint, it needs this, it needs whatever. But I just don't have the time. And you know, for anybody that's interested in the car, by all means have a look at it. But just bear in mind that it's my daily car.
Yeah.
So I've got to be realistic with finances and what I do because I've got a business to run. But because of what it is, it's such an interesting engine. So the engine is the same power plant that's used in one of the high performance cars. I can't pin it what it is, but it's something along the lines of like a Koenigsegg or whatever else.
Yep.
But obviously that engine that's in mine compared to the one that's fitted to the hypercar supercar is going to be drastically different. But the main guts of it are essentially the same.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know, and I'm more than happy to be called out on it. But there's some similarities.
Yeah.
But that car's going to set me back 10 grand easy to get it where I need it to be, and it will probably need, a full air ride conversion, because the ABC system won't allow it to. We were talking earlier about the suspension swings and stuff, the geometries of it. It just won't allow it to do it.
Yeah.
But again, it's throwing money into a car that is essentially a non-runner. So I've got to be fairly sensible with where I kind of throw money in to a point. Like it needs paint, for instance, and it's only a very small amount, but because it's that rear quarter, it's probably going to want the roof and again, Nick comes from a paint background,
right?
So I said to him, I was like, "What's the best deal?" And he was like, "Honestly, paint the whole car."
Right. At that point, you should. Yeah.
And this is the thing: is because of what it is, it's an 88,000 mile twin turbo S class that's best part of immaculate.
Yep.
And I can't go half-hearted on it. Everything's got to be so good. And if it does become, not the term show car, but something that I throw into the public eye, it commands a certain amount of credibility just for what it is.
Right.
So it's got to reflect. I've got to reflect what Mercedes tried to do with the S-Class originally, and it's a flagship car.
It is, yeah.
As far as I'm aware, from that chassis, above the S600 L2 Turbo, you get the S65, which is the high-power version. And then up from that again, you're into Maybach territory.
Right.
Which is a different element of vehicle completely. Yep. So if that's, let's say, two fit levels back from a Maybach, it's a relatively big statement to have as a car.
Right. Yeah. And totally worth putting back on the road again.
Yeah.
Totally worth going in on it.
And compared to a 1.8 202, it's literally, it's not quite the same era. That would have been
newer.
203.
Right.
But it's almost the most basic C-Class you could buy.
Yep.
Compared to the most expensive S-Class bar the AMG.
Right.
And even then you're talking plus 120,000 for the car.
Yeah, insane.
And somebody bought it.
The car was 150, one something?
Yeah, so the final bill of sale was just over 149.
Insane. In 04.
In 2004, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I'm bummed that we're not driving it to roll hard, but we are driving my Mark III Golf. Well, yes. Possibly.
Well, yeah.
Possibly taking the Mark III Golf to Bister, but you're taking your W202, and tomorrow night we're going to see Ben Walker. Yep. Ben's coming down. Ben will be on the podcast, but he is bringing his properly restored E28.
Unreal. I've not seen it, and you've not seen it, but
not since the restoration.
From what we've seen, either via text or on the social media channels, that thing is unreal. And it's meticulous.
Yeah,
it's so good.
So we drove that car from where he lives to Players Classic in 2019, 7 hours, 7.5 hours or something like that, maybe even 8 hours. And I don't know if it was the M10, but it was the small motor, and he's finally M20 swapped it. And it's so he's stepped up on the motor. Pretty sure it's an M20, not an M52 or whatever.
Oh, my BMW engine knowledge is.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's restored the car though. Right down to a bare shell, respray, every bushing, nut and bolt, re-zinced, proper. So he's on his maiden voyage for as far as more than a 40-minute drive. Yeah.
It's a big journey.
So he's doing about 5 hours here tomorrow. So we're going to be rolling with your manual, which I think is cool because we didn't get him in the States. We didn't get a manual W202 in the States. And if we did, it was as base spec as they came, and I'm unaware of them. But manual 202, Benz E28, possibly the Golf. That's sitting bone stock, which we drove for the first time today, following you about 30 minutes through the countryside to a car wash.
We did about 15 miles each way.
What a dream for a bone stock Mark III.
And even I want to pick the car up for you. It was literally a case of turning up there. We'd discussed the advert and done some bits and pieces. And I kind of looked at it and I went, this could go one of two ways. It could look like a gem and just drive
in photos, right?
Drive like a bag.
Well, to back up, yeah. So everyone that knows about the Mark III Golf is you were the one who went and looked at it for me, and it turned out to only be a few miles down the road.
Yeah, literally from where I live, which is a mile from this facility, it was probably less than 10 miles away.
Unreal. So you were
crazy.
able to just skip down the road.
Yep.
Turns out the guy selling it had the same color W202 as you.
Literally had a Vivianet Green 202, and the thing was just immaculate. Full leather interior, 230 compressor. And I was like,
Daily driver.
daily driver. And I turned up and I shook the guy's hand. He looked at my car and was like, I've seen your car on Instagram and stuff. And I was like,
So funny.
yeah, great. I haven't seen yours. And he went, no, I don't really bother with it. And
Yeah.
it's just the most lovely example in the world. The guy's not even lowered it.
It's such a small world too, because like I found this listing for this Golf on Marketplace
Yep.
because I knew I was coming over, and I'm like, well, I just sold the W108 Mercedes. Why don't we look at Marketplace in your area?
Try and find something, yeah.
And it all came together. One owner Mark III Golf, well, one family owned,
Yeah.
and super low miles, as clean as a Mark III Golf gets.
And the nice thing that I found about the whole transition was the fact that the company that we bought the vehicle off is the same firm and the same guy that had looked after the car its entire existence.
Yep. Pretty crazy.
And I kind of walked into that situation a bit open-eyed, because you just, especially buying on behalf of somebody else.
Yep.
That's one thing, but for buying on behalf of somebody else that's in a different country,
Yep.
it's a different kettle of fish, because the responsibility is relatively big.
Yeah.
You know, finance on the car is finance, but this is, you know, it's almost an element of trust, isn't it? So
Right.
I walked in, looked at the car, the guy came up, we did, you know, the 202 thing, and he kind of beat me up on that a little bit. So
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, all right. I kind of get this now.
Yeah.
So I said, look, just give me the keys, fire it up. And because it's unmodified, you can get underneath it.
Yeah.
You know, it's perfectly high enough, so I'm cranked underneath it. And it
With
is
me on FaceTime.
literally on the phone.
Yeah.
And bar one small little piece that had been repaired, it is absolutely immaculate. But even to the
Yep.
point that the repair is fantastic, you wouldn't even notice that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I'm looking way too much into this when I was at the facility. So I get home, you do the stuff, we sort the finances out, big day comes. So I'd driven it all of about 4 miles.
Yep.
Got a bit of a feel for it, but I'm in town. You know, I haven't stretched it, I haven't done anything. Yeah, great,
Right.
everything's fine.
Right.
And there's an opportunity, or there's like a national speed limit road between the two, so you have to build the car up and speed up and stuff.
Yep.
And it was like, right, if anything's going to become aware, it will happen now. You get into speed, wheel bearings will start to wobble,
Yep.
shakers will start
Make
to
some
go, whatever
noise.
else. Yeah,
Yep.
just effortless.
And
And
so today was the first time I drove it, aside from just driving around your unit here.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's super tight, accelerates well. I mean, it's a carbureted Mark III, which I didn't. We didn't even have carbureted Mark IIs in America, all mechanical injected or digi.
Yep.
And so this is a Mark III with a carburetor on it. So it seems super archaic, but man, does that thing just purr.
and we had a situation today. So I shut the shop up early. Myself, John, and one of my guys who works for me, Alan. We popped out. So we had my green, literally brightest green you can get, 202.
Slammed.
Yeah, slammed and nasty looking and bounced up and down.
Yeah.
And then a beautiful example of a Mark III.
Bone stock.
Bone stock, and then behind it, Alan's just bought another 202, the same year, different colour, and we've just slammed it in the last few days.
Yeah.
And you could see people coming past us just like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You seen this?
Yeah.
3 90s cars.
Yeah.
It was just a great
It
experience.
was cool. It was a cool drive. It didn't last long enough. You know, we just kind of zipped out, washed the cars, got coffee, zipped back. But it was pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to driving it more this trip. I mean, we're here for another week. Yeah, another week.
Yeah.
So
it's just a lovely thing to find a car like that anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just difficult. But
It was pretty cool because I never drove my Lada over here. I bought the Lada here a few years ago and then flew home and then shipped it over, and that was fun. But it was really cool to purchase this car, come over here, and now be using it as transportation while here and putting it around. So we'll see at the end if it comes back stateside or not. But it was a great experience getting out with it today. Looking forward to driving it more. What have we done? We've done an hour and a half, dude. We've done an hour and a half, and I have to pee so bad. And normally I take breaks. Normally we'll break. We won't hold it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've done an hour and a half. I know it's late. It's super late. We're in the hangar. We got this set up. We'll have this set up for Ben tomorrow probably.
Yep.
And dude, this has been awesome. It's been awesome.
It's been good, and it's been a long time coming.
It has.
So when when John's been over in the past, it's been a case of wherever you've been, I'll just cruise down.
Which has been awesome.
We've had some great experiences, but there's never been a kind of just a chill. You know, it's never been. There's always been something hectic going on, like going to shows
or you've driven literally 3.5 hours to come hang out for a day and drive 3.5 hours home. You know, so
it's one of them things that. But to do this, to do travel down to Roll Hard, sort the golf out, come and see the shop, do a bit of stuff around Wales.
Yeah.
You know, this has been a long time coming.
Yeah,
and I will get to the States.
Absolutely, we got to get you to the States.
When, provided the business keeps going the way it is, I'll come and see you.
You let me know when you book a flight, and we'll take care of you for sure. This has been awesome, Steve. Glad we did this. Hopefully, we do another one soon.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's here or it's over in the States.
Well, it's got to be your place next time.
Yeah.
Your place, your coffee, your hangar.
In the studio. Yep. Yeah,
well,
my hangar.
You've got a full studio.
I've got an actual podcast studio. Yeah, it's not an aircraft.
Just sitting in a big shed in the middle of Wales.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this has been awesome, man. I'm looking forward to riding tomorrow. So we're all getting, Ben, you and myself are all getting back on our bikes.
Yeah.
I spent all last week trying to like limber up a little bit. You and Ben started doing it as well. But to be fair, even though Ben's about to turn 30. So you're a couple years older than him. So I'm like a solid 8 years older than you guys. But I've been doing it more recently, so I feel like I'm pretty limbered up. But as we're setting this stuff up, I kind of tweaked my hip pretty hard, so I'm hurting. But tomorrow, we're about to go ride for the first time together, and I am so stoked about it.
Yeah.
So we'll have to film some of that. That'll be coming to the YouTube channel as well. Hopefully nobody gets hurt. No. And we have a super fun time. We're going to be riding in Cardiff and Bristol. Yeah. That'll be super fun.
I mean, and if there's, I know Andy Crew.
He's coming down. I forgot about that. Yeah, he's going to come down.
He said he's going to come down, and I don't know why, but it seemed to, we're not old guys, but we're not young guys. But in the BMX world,
we're up there.
I don't know. I've been out of it for as long as I've been in Wales. I kind of just dropped it. I used to ride every day in Leicester. I never got to a position where I was massively competent or doing big wild stunts and stuff. But it was a good. I always saw BMX like I saw cars. Yeah. It was the community that made it, and the fact that you had a common interest was one of them things. Yep. But BMX has got and for anyone that's an ex-rider or rides now, it's with you for life.
Right. It's always in your blood.
It never goes.
For sure. Yeah. I've always got the itch.
And I love that about it.
I'll be driving somewhere and I'll see something. I'm like, oh man, that's a perfect like bank to rail or something. Like, it's always in the blood.
You see stuff like when we went to the coffee place earlier. I looked over my shoulder and there's like a tiny little 4.5 foot flat bank to just the top deck. Yep. And I kind of saw it and went, yeah, maybe something. I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
Jump and fall off probably, but
yep.
But no, it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll swing by Crucial BMX in Bristol. Haven't seen Scott in years, so it'll be cool to be there. They got a mini ramp out back now.
But this trip essentially is, I mean, years and years of planning because every time we've met up,
I didn't bring my bike.
We've spoken about it. I've never brought my bike down. Yeah. And again with Ben, when we last got together with Ben, we spoke about it, and it's never really happened. And now, when you said you were bringing your bike, I was like,
yeah, exactly. Because the last time I was here, I rode Ben's bike at a skate park. And I was like, man, I got to bring my own bike over because riding someone else's bike doesn't feel quite right. So here we are. I mean, it cost a bit to get it on the plane, but we're here. And
I mean, from your stuff, you'll probably throw something on Instagram afterwards. We will just be probably doing the same thing, just sitting around ruined in the middle of the night going, that wasn't a great idea, was it?
Yeah, it'll be fun while it's happening.
And then to do the reckoning day will be walking around Roll Hard.
Yep.
Walking around on Sunday.
We'll be feeling it.
So if you see us walking around like we're broken, we're probably going to be broken. Yep. So anybody that wants to buy us a coffee.
Proper broke. Well, dude.
Please sort us out.
This has been awesome. Can't wait for, riding Roll Hard this weekend. Yeah. Thank you again so much for your help with the Mark III. Nothing. I mean, that was amazing. We'll do it the opposite way one of these days. You'll find something American you want.
A C36202 and I'll send mine straight over.
Sounds good to me.
Straight swap.
Steve, this has been awesome. Instagram is just Steve Perriss, right?
No, it's Steve_W202. So that's,
W202.
It's that simple, yeah.
That easy.
And it's literally just a green W202 forever.
Yep.
And other, stories of different things. Stories go up and down. There's all kinds of
stuff.
But
people might want to see that 600 come together. That might be enough motivation to keep that thing on the burner.
I'm going to be doing a lot of. I'm not a huge Instagram guy. It doesn't really come into my remit. But certainly this weekend, I'll be doing a lot of stuff supporting my friends here. So Nick with 187 Garage, who's done the 190 DTM, and his partner. And basically all the local guys, you know, we've got a pretty good tight-knit security here. Security, we've got quite a community where we've all got different tastes, but we've all got similar cars. So, just look at mine and Alan's car.
Yep.
It's exactly the same car, but literally poles apart. And, we often hang out and do stuff. So if anybody's interested in early 90s Mercedes cars or anything like that, then by all means, jump on board, have a look, see what you want to do. Like I say, I'm not huge on it, but if it's interesting for you, then by all means, just jump on it, have a look. And if you need any European parts, I've just got a hanger full of them.
Yep. Well, cool, Steve. Thanks again for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun, and we'll see how the weekend goes.
Yeah, can't wait. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.